Howdy again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is episode number 76B, the answer portion of my What Is It series, and I'm doing something a little different here. This is really two videos in one, and I'm going to give you the answers for these real quickly here, and that'll only take a minute or two. Just no nonsense, no description, just the answer of actually what the tool is. And if you like that and you want to watch more, there's about 12 minutes of my baloney that you can watch, but that is optional. Let's see how this goes. Give me a thumbs up if you like the format. Number one is a small surgical grade tool used by doctors to drill into the skull to relieve pressure on the brain. There's probably other orthopedic uses for this as well. This is a banding or strap cutter to cut the bands, whether they be metal or plastic, off of crates and packages. Number three is a padlock that would be used on various electrical panels, tamper-proof, like telephone boxes and so on that you might see along the country road, similar to what they use on railroad switches. And this is a small single-use torque wrench that's preset for a certain torque value to tighten things such as hose clamps and so on, so that Bubba cannot screw it up. So that's the answer to these four tools. If you want to see more and details, stand by. Howdy once again, it's Tubalcain at your service, and this is episode number 76B, the answer portion of my What Is It Mystery Tool series, and I've got some interesting items here. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Mike Moser of Nebraska for donating these four items, plus a few more that will be shown in a future episode. And did you know that I learn far more while I'm making videos than any of you learn while you're watching them? So I have to do research and study, and people give me input, so I learn an awful lot. Thought you'd enjoy seeing this picture of me when I was in my prime. Actually, I'm showing this because I like the frame that somebody gave me for Christmas with tools, being an avid tool collector. Alright, let's begin with some of these interesting tools and a lot of little sidelights and extra credit here as well. So make sure that you watch part one if you didn't already, and I do understand some of you only like to watch part two, the answers. And if I seem a little bit hyper, it's because someone gave me a six-pack of this energy drink. I've never had an energy drink in my life. I didn't know what they were, but if I chatter like a chatterbox, that is why. You can blame that. So let's get started. Okay, these are the tools, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's get started with number 1 here. And this is a Codman brand cranial drill meant to relieve pressure in the skull, probably from an accident, and I believe it to be disposable. It's plastic. This is probably stainless steel with a depth stop, because you don't want them drilling too deep, do you? I don't like the idea of that little set screw on the flutes because it's liable to slip, and they gave a different size here for children, I guess. Now, what is that all about? Because the Egyptians did this years and years ago, and they called it trepanning. Let's have a little sidebar lesson on that, shall we? And this is from the ancient Greek, and I suppose other civilizations as well, although I mentioned the Egyptians, but it's all about drilling or boring a hole, and hence the name. But we do trepanning in metalworking as well, do we not? So you can read through that, or just plain look it up if you're in the mood, and wow, there we go. That looks like fun. And even worse, they have the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz doing the operation. I bet this thing cost a fortune, even though it's disposable. I tried to find out the price. I looked it up on the internet, and they didn't want me to know the price, I guess. But anyway, you guess on what this costs. It would be hundreds of dollars, but someone said, well, that looks exactly like a Fisker's, and it sure does. And this I got for nothing. Anyone want me to use it? But while I was doing this, I think of all kinds of other things. Boy, they look alike, don't they? Probably made out of the same mold. But When I first started teaching, there were no electric drills in the shop, so I had the kids drilling rivet holes with a drill like this. This is a Stanley, and it's so neat, I thought, compared to the ones my dad had, because you couldn't pinch your fingers in the gears. However, you know where I just got this? Out of my box that is going to the, not the Goodwill store, but the Habitat store. So I pulled it out to show you before it's gone for good. But also note that Bubba decided that I'm not going to hang it this way on my cabinet with a hook. I think I'll drill a 3/8 hole through there. And as it broke through, of course, it splintered out like crazy. But, you know, leave it up to Bubba to screw up the simplest job. And here's another one that I thought was neat. I had this on my rack. I forgot that I owned it. It's a Dunlap. By the way, did I tell you that I now suffer from Dunlap disease? Yeah, my belly Dunlap over my belt. But this is kind of neat too, and it's not a finger pincher. But we got battery drills. And what I was going to say is that, you know, in the operating room, why didn't they use a battery-powered DeWalt type of drill? You know why they didn't? Because there was a 50-50 chance of the battery being dead when they went to use it. So they used the Armstrong method. All right, I beat that to death. You can tell I've been drinking caffeine. This is, of course, a shear to cut the strapping or banding on a shipment, whether it be nylon or metal strapping. Obviously, this is old enough, from 1937 to be for metal. That before they used plastic. But thank you to a few people who sent me links to patent drawings and so on, and I'll put some stills of this. This is the 1937 patent drawing, and remember that often the patent drawing looks nothing like the final product, but it's all about concepts there and what parts are unique and patentable. And of course, this is how it works. You just stick that into the cardboard or the crating, and it's got kind of a guide in there, and oh, I'm not all the way in. And this still cuts pretty neat, and it's a nice mechanism. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking this is a reversible cutting jaw so that you always have a sharp one. I'm not positive. It does not mention that in the patent at all. But what is interesting here, and I'm going to waste a lot of time talking about this kind of spring. Thank you for those of you that identified that as far as what it's technically and actually called. And I'll get back to that in a second. But I distinctly, this is my wife's poultry shear, which sometimes I use for cutting metal. And that has the same spring on it. And I remember when I must have been 6 or 8 years old watching my Aunt Margaret in Cedarburg, Wisconsin cut up a chicken, and I was intrigued by the whole process, but particularly this spring, and I couldn't wait till she was done so I could play with it, but she was afraid that I would cut myself. A lot of these have a little holder right here, but wouldn't the chicken and turkey juice get caught in there and just be a horrible mess? So my Uncle John at the same address in the same year had a garden snips for trimming that had that on it. I don't know why would a 8-year-old be intrigued by that, but I sure was and still am. All right, let's talk more about that, as if I haven't talked enough. Thank you to the unidentified man in the comments who said he was from Africa, and over there they had a different word for that spring, and it had to do with the pupa. So I thought that was interesting because it sure has a similar appearance to a pupa, does it not? So the correct name for this spring is a volute spring, and this is from Wikipedia, who I feel I can use freely since I have contributed to the good of the cause. In fact, this is called a double volute, and I will take a still picture of this and include that at the end for those with inquiring minds. Over the years, there are many other ways of putting a spring into a lever type of a device besides this spring. Quite often you see a little coil springs in there, compression springs, but I've had some of those fail. However, I still like these, and sometimes you'll see this type of pliers or bigger pliers with a leaf spring in there, and I've also seen those broken as well. And one thing I didn't tell you yet, because I'm never done with my trivia, this is a Wiss who makes all kinds of shears, but this was imported from Germany. And look at the goo in there. That's sickening. I'm going to throw this away. Serrated teeth too. By the way, when I went to sneak this back in my wife's kitchen drawer, I said, hey, you need to clean that. I was kind of critical, but kind. And she said, you know what? This came from a garage sale, and I never did use this, she said. So maybe we'll throw it away. Looks pretty gnarly. In 1959, I worked at the hardware store, and George Shinsky, whom I loved and was a veteran of the Second World War with a buggered up leg where the recoil of a cannon had hit him, told me to be very, very careful when I unbanded things, and he demonstrated with the snips, not one of these. We didn't have one of these, didn't know what it was, but he said, now stand back, and as he snipped that band came right by the two of us, and he says, now you know to watch out, because these things are under great compression. Thank you, George, for telling me that, and I remember that even though it's almost 70 years ago. Did you hear my spite furnace come on just as I started? You probably can hear it in the background. Now, Mike told me that this was a security padlock for phone equipment cabinets, but I think it's used by railroads and all kinds of firms who are locking up their cabinets or their electrical things, and it takes a triangular key, which nobody's going to have, and for the heck of it, I tried to reach in there with a needle nose pliers, and that doesn't work at all. I'll show you some pictures on the internet, but apparently the same company or the same type of device was used on railroad switches, and they were made out of brass, of course, because they were out in the weather, but so is this out in the weather, more than likely. Some say that it's for lockout, tagout. There's probably a lot of uses for this. And I don't know if they're very expensive. Probably not, because there's millions of them around. Let's take a look at a few pictures on the internet, and the only marking on here is that. I guess that's the trademark, and I don't know whether it's upside down or inside out or what that reads, but let's do a little search and see what I can find. And here's number 4. Almost everybody had this correct, that it is a single-purpose torque wrench. So you could put your sockets or whatever on the square down here, and right here it is marked first of all by the company's name. So I have looked that up, out of Massachusetts. These are quite expensive, by the way, over $100 I believe, and this one is for 40 inch-pounds. Now that's not very much. So he said that it was probably used for, if I can find that, he said that it was a torque wrench for phone terminals, but with a question mark there, so I don't think that. I think that there are probably hundreds of uses for this, depending on which one you purchase, with how many inch-pounds or foot-pounds or whatever it is. But it has a good heft to it, and like I said, probably very expensive. So there it is in a drill press vise, 40 inch-pounds. By the way, it has a ratchet going backwards. But forwards, can you hear it clicks? So when you tighten that hose clamp, or for whatever this is, you cannot over tighten it and ruin it. Even Bubba. Now Bubba would find some way of wrecking it, wouldn't he? Well, that completes the video. I had kind of fun doing it. I hope you had some chuckles out of it. Be sure and watch my hundreds and hundreds, 1,400 other shop videos if you like this. Give me a thumbs up if I deserve it. It helps the channel, and I'll see you next time, I hope. Looking on the internet, here are some various locks, and they claim to be locks for railroad switches. So I do not believe that the lock I showed you is for lockout tagout. Those look totally different. They're usually painted red. But anyway, that's the general purpose of these.